Thank you, Bridget Baker. I appreciate that warm welcome. I understand that Bridget is actually the Vice President of the University Club of Chicago, and I'm fairly partial to Vice Presidents. So join me in thanking Bridget for that overly generous introduction and your hospitality today. It is good to be back in Chicago to address this distinguished group of Americans, the men and women of the University Club of Chicago. It was in this city on the south side that my parents grew up. As you heard from Bridget, my grandfather immigrated from Ireland, came to Chicago, drove a bus for 40 years, still one of the best men I'll ever know. In so many ways, Chicago is my second hometown. I cannot remember a family holiday where we didn't pack up the station wagon, drive up Highway 31, and come and spend time with our aunts and uncles, many of whom still live here in this great city. So thank you for the warm welcome to the great city of Chicago. And also, it's wonderful to be here with each one of you. It's amazing to think since 1887, this club has provided a platform for leaders in private and in public life to further our national dialogue in search of solutions. Here in this great city, in this great state, it's my honor to continue that tradition. So thank you all for making time to be with us today. And as I thank the members who are here, let me at least acknowledge one who is not here. He was born on a small family farm in central Illinois. He would go on to literally be a business leader around the world. But I know he cherished his time at the University Club of Chicago. And while he left us this last January, I know he left an indelible mark on so many of you, as he did on our family when his son Christopher married my niece and has now produced 4 wonderful grandchildren for my brother. Would you join me in acknowledging and recognizing the immense contributions to Chicago and to the University Club of the late and great Greg Doolin? Thank you. You know, my life has changed a lot since the last time we saw each other. After leaving office, Karen and I moved home to Indiana. We bought 5 acres and a pond. I get to mow my own lawn. Bought a John Deere tractor, 54-inch deck, 0-turn radius, 25 horsepower. You know, one of the good parts about no longer being vice president is you get to drive your own car. One of the bad parts is you get to pay for your own gas. I became a grandfather for the first time ever in the last year. My son, who's a fighter pilot in the United States Marine Corps, and his wonderful wife gave us little Avery Grace 14 months ago, and she's crazy about me. So we've been blessed in our lives. But we learned a great and sublime truth, maybe only true in America, and that is you can be a member of Congress for 12 years from your home state. You can be the governor of your home state for 4. You can even be vice president of the United States of America, but you're still going to wait 25 minutes for a table at Olive Garden on Saturday night at 7 o'clock. True story. I sent a note to my daughter that night when we finally got a table, and she wrote me back and said, "That's America, Dad." And you know what? She's right. She really is. But I want to thank you all for coming out today. You know, we're living in a very challenging time in the life of our nation. I mean, the truth is our country is facing challenges at home and abroad, likes of which I can't remember in my 63 years. The truth is America is facing a growing economic crisis that's unlike any other in our nation's 244-year history. Inflation is rampant. Gas and food prices are rising. Real wages are falling. And the stock market is plummeting. Grocery stores, from time to time, are empty, and that confidence and pride that were once synonymous with the American people in recent years has been replaced with fear and a national anxiety. But let me say, to quote the old book, fear is useless. What is needed is leadership grounded in American values. Because what's unique about this moment is that this economic wound that we're experiencing is entirely self-inflicted. Unlike the Great Depression in the 1930s, the stagflation of the 1970s, or even the Great Recession of 2008, the economic woes now upon us have been caused almost single-handedly by one person, the 46th President of the United States of America, Joe Biden. You know, never in my lifetime has there been a greater disconnect between the President and the American people. I mean, last year we witnessed the President literally scold the American people about not taking vaccines, saying that he was a patient man, but his patience was running thin. And earlier this year, the President stood before the American people and actually said that his first year in office had been, and I quote, a year of enormous progress. In fact, President Biden added, I have probably outperformed what anybody thought would happen. Well, the American people have a markedly different view, and it's grounded in reality. I mean, 56% of Americans believe the country's already in the midst of an economic recession. After reaching a new high for this millennium under our administration, consumer sentiment is near the lowest this millennium under President Biden already. No matter what label economists use, average Americans know that tough economic times are upon us. They know there will be more economic pain to come in the days ahead as well. And the truth is, the majority of Americans know that President Biden's economic policies have failed utterly and completely, and it is time for a change of direction for America. A few years ago, an economic crisis of this magnitude would have been unimaginable. I mean, President Biden inherited the most prosperous economy in the history of the world. Before the pandemic hit, under the Trump-Pence administration, Americans had gained more than 7 million new jobs. Unemployment plummeted to the lowest rate in 50 years. More than 10 million people were lifted off welfare. And we saw the largest poverty reduction in modern history. And the list goes on. Real median household incomes soared by nearly $6,000 to a new record, more than 5 times the gains made under the immediate previous administration. Millions of American families were filled with fresh hope for the first time in years. Under our administration, the renewal of American prosperity was not an accident. It was a choice. We chose to create the most powerful economy the world had ever seen. We put timeless American principles into practice and policy, and it worked. America prospered. I mean, we proved in just a few short years that low taxes are the key to creating prosperity for Americans of every background, every income group. We passed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. We cut taxes in half for the typical family of 4. We doubled the child tax credit. We delivered more than $3.2 trillion in tax relief for working families and businesses all across the country. We passed the first ever tax credit for employers who provided paid parental leave. And we passed 12 weeks of paid family leave for government employees as a model for the country. And to promote investment in distressed American communities, our tax plan created nearly 9,000 opportunity zones where capital gains on long-term investments are now taxed at zero, and investments have been pouring into long-neglected communities ever since. You know, on this Juneteenth holiday, when we commemorate the emancipation of enslaved Americans by General Order 3, on June 19, 1865, I couldn't be more proud that under the Trump-Pence administration, we expanded educational opportunities for minorities. We doubled the D.C. voucher program. We created those opportunity zones. We saw billions of dollars of investments in our inner cities, and we saw the lowest unemployment ever recorded for African Americans in American history. We celebrate the progress we've made toward a more perfect union. And I'm so proud of the fact that under our administration, all ships were rising for every American, regardless of race or creed or color. In addition to delivering tax relief for middle taxpayers, we also cut taxes on American businesses, like so many well represented here. We helped American businesses compete and win against foreign competitors. We made capital investments fully and immediately deductible. We lowered our business tax from the highest in the developed world to one of the most competitive. And it was literally within days that jobs and factories and investments came flooding back into American communities from overseas. After losing 60,000 factories under the previous two administrations, under our administration, America gained 12,000 new factories because employers were no longer driven offshore by exorbitantly high taxes. We created a tax code that put American jobs, American workers, and American business first. But it wasn't just the tax code. We removed nearly 25,000 pages of job-destroying regulations from the Federal Register, more than any administration in American history. And we saved the average American household an extra $3,100 a year, just in red tape savings alone. And beyond all of that, we unleashed American energy to power that growing economy. You know, under the Trump-Pence administration, America became the #1 producer of oil and natural gas in the world. And for the first time in nearly 70 years, we became a net exporter of energy. And net energy imports fell to the lowest level in more than half a century. It's truly incredible. You know, I can't help but think of what Daniel Webster said in words that are inscribed on the wall of the House of Representatives. He said, "Let us develop the resources of our land and call forth its power, so that we might do something in our time worthy to be remembered." In our time, we unleashed American energy. We responsibly developed the God-given natural resources of this country, and it drove America to unprecedented prosperity. But how times have changed. Just 17 months later, the Biden administration has squandered American prosperity faster than any other administration in the history of our country. Inflation's at a 40-year high, debasing our currency and making every dollar earned by hardworking Americans worth less than it was the day before. Gasoline prices have increased by 75% since Joe Biden became president, rippling across the economy and driving up the cost of every product shipped from factory to retail store. Here in Illinois, I'm told that gas prices have already set a new record of over $5.50 a gallon. And American families are struggling. I hear about it everywhere I go. I went to my 45th high school reunion this last Friday night down in Columbus, Indiana. Saw a lot of old friends. But I heard one after another talk to me about the struggle that they're facing in their families, just making ends meet. Prices are continuing to rise on everything from food to housing to basic necessities. And as I think about that little Avery Grace, my perfect little granddaughter, it just broke my heart that after the Biden administration shut down the Abbott Labs baby formula factory in Michigan, newborn mothers were unable to find formula. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, literally was on Facebook trading ideas with friends to give them suggestions about where to go. Young mothers deserve better in America. Beyond all that, the median rent on apartments nationwide is now above $2,000 for the first time in history. I mean, I often tell people my three brothers and I grew up to be rich and famous. They're rich and I'm famous. Our family lived on a budget all of our lives. Followed a calling into public service and put 3 kids through college. And the very idea that the basic costs of living, of grocery and housing and gas, are rising at the rate they're rising, I understand at a deeply personal level, having been at the kitchen table for much of the last 20 years, having to square our checkbook with the bills coming in. And that's what the American people are facing today. I mean, even the cost of financing a new car has soared to over $650 a month, which is also a record high. And worst of all, real wages are plummeting fast, down 3% in just the last year as a result of inflation. There's no end in sight. And GDP growth was negative in the first quarter of the year. There's still nearly a million fewer people employed than we had in February of 2022, at the start of the pandemic, or 2020, rather. Compared to the trend set during the Trump-Pence administration, we are 6.2 million employees below the trend where we ought to be today, regardless of what you hear. All the stock market gains under President Biden, I probably don't have to tell many of you in this room, have been erased, wiping out nearly $3 trillion from the retirement accounts of American workers. The NFIB Small Business Optimism Index fell last month to the lowest level in the history of the 48-year survey. As a result of Biden's inflation, the Federal Reserve just enacted the largest interest rate hike in 3 decades and signaled that more rate increases will continue. As we stand here today in the great city of Chicago, fair-minded Americans have to ask, how much more can the American people take? Now, President Biden has offered plenty of excuses, but few solutions. Rising energy prices are the number one driver of inflation, but the president has clearly no idea how to bring energy prices down. He released oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve on several occasions, which failed to make a dent in the prices at the pump. But it did succeed in making our nation more vulnerable in the event of a national security emergency. Gas prices, believe it or not, have actually increased by 50% since the president began releasing oil from the Strategic Reserve. The administration also, just last week, sent a threatening letter to America's oil CEOs, implying that they were guilty of price gouging, even as he's refusing to authorize new leases for energy production. And President Biden has blamed Vladimir Putin's unconscionable invasion of Ukraine for our present energy crisis. The truth is, gasoline prices are skyrocketing not because of the war in Ukraine. Gas prices are rising because of Joe Biden's war on energy, and it has got to stop, and stop today. Fossil fuels provide 80% of our energy needs. It's no surprise when you see the policies of this administration to remember that Joe Biden, during his campaign, said that he promised to, quote, end fossil fuels, close quote. I mean, he's making good on a promise. I mean, the first day he took office, he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. He imposed drilling moratoriums. He refused to auction oil and gas leases on federal lands. And even worse, he's installed a cabal of bureaucrats who are working hand in glove with activist liberals to make investments in traditional energy all but impossible. His climate envoy, John Kerry, is actually pressuring banks to refuse to make loans to oil and gas companies in this country, forcing energy companies to abide by left-wing environmental and social principles to the detriment of business, employees, and shareholders. Together, liberals both in government and the private sector are making it virtually impossible to increase energy production, at least in this country. Most recently, the White House has explored sending Americans rebate cards to offset gas prices, which would only drive inflation even higher. I mean, runaway inflation is the predictable result of runaway spending. You cannot spend your way out of a problem that is caused by overspending. I mean, Democrats already passed more than $3 trillion in spending in the last year. You know, I must tell you, when I was leading the White House Coronavirus Task Force, I couldn't be more proud of the way the American people stepped forward and came together in the midst of that pandemic, especially in those early days. But I'm also proud of what we did for American families and businesses, the Paycheck Protection Program, the direct support for families, and that everything that we did during the Trump-Pence administration during the coronavirus pandemic passed the Congress on an overwhelming and bipartisan basis. The contrast, the first major legislation passed by the Biden administration passed on a party line vote, nearly $2 trillion in spending, that economists on the left and the right all agree lit the fuse of the inflation that's assaulting American family budgets every day. I mean, the truth is, spending is out of control in Washington, D.C. In fact, Democrats in the Congress and the administration are still calling for even more spending. The Build Back Better plan, trying to be resurrected every day, set us on a path to build back broke. I mean, the truth is, Democrats will have spent more than the economies of Canada, Mexico, and Brazil combined before it's all over. Now, earlier this year, the president proposed placing a 15% tax on income earned by American companies selling products overseas, on top of the tax they already pay to foreign countries where the sale is made. The winner will be China. I mean, China stands to gain thousands of jobs as employers flee the crushing tax burden of Joe Biden's America. I mean, the National Association of Manufacturers estimates Biden's proposed tax hike could destroy as many as 1 million American jobs. I know I don't have to tell the people of Illinois what happens when you overtax and overregulate employers. I have to tell you, as your neighbor to the east, back when I was governor, I loved competing with Illinois for jobs. It's what we called easy pickings. But honestly, as a fellow Midwesterner, it broke my heart to hear that Caterpillar and Boeing were moving out of Illinois. They're moving to low-tax states. The truth is, though, the policies of the Biden administration aren't going to cause jobs to move from your state to another state. They're going to cause jobs to move from the United States to places like China. So let me just say, the time has come, for the sake of the American people, for President Joe Biden to put our country first and put our families first and put America back on a path to prosperity built on American principles and ideas. All of us take the same oath of office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. The preamble of the Constitution says that we form this government to provide for the common defense, to promote the general welfare, to ensure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. It's time for Joe Biden to keep his oath. It's time for Joe Biden to provide for the common defense, to provide for our military, and secure the border of the United States of America. It's time for Joe Biden to promote the general welfare. The general welfare that derives in this country from a prosperous free market economy. The time has come for Joe Biden to tell the extreme elements in his own party, those who advocate the radical left agenda of more taxes, more regulation, less American energy, and open borders, that enough is enough. It's time for Joe Biden to keep his oath and tell those elements of his own party, I serve all the American people, and we are going to pursue policies that will make America strong and prosperous and free again. The truth is, we know how to do it. We did it before. You know, I pulled together a whole range of men and women from the cabinet and from the conservative movement over the last 2 years to help build what we called a freedom agenda. We solicited ideas from nearly 50 of the top conservative minds in the country. So let me give you a few ideas about how we turn this country around and turn this economy around. But you can read all about it if you want to go to advancingamericanfreedom.com and see it for yourself. The advocacy group I founded solicited those ideas, as I said, from the brightest stars in the conservative movement. And we published that freedom agenda. It encourages the following things. First and foremost, we must set ourselves on a path to liberate the American people from oppressive taxation, tyrannical bureaucracy, and the overregulation that has our economy stuck in neutral. We're sliding backwards. To do that, first and foremost, we need to extend the Trump-Pence tax cuts that help create millions of American jobs and eliminate special breaks for liberal states that get rewarded for taxing and spending irresponsibly. Second, lawmakers must end runaway inflation experienced under President Biden by slashing government spending and requiring a balanced federal budget without raising taxes. The biggest driver of inflation is runaway spending and Biden's war on energy. And so we also need to unleash American energy today. Third, lawmakers should get government off the backs of the American people by drastically overhauling the federal permitting process for energy infrastructure and other development projects that will create jobs. Lawmakers should also restore the rule adopted under the Trump-Pence administration. We require that at least 2 regulations be eliminated for every new federal regulation created. And finally, we need to recognize that trade means jobs. But fair trade means jobs for American workers and American communities. And so we need to renegotiate our trade agreements around the world in ways that put American jobs first and bring jobs back to our country. We need to regain control of our vital supply chains. I mean, today we actually have a man-made scarcity of computer chips, automobiles, and as I mentioned before, baby formula, making all those products more expensive. The way to fix the problem is to make more products in the United States of America. For families and communities to prosper, coast to coast, we have to make it our aim simply to make America the best place in the world to work, invest, innovate, build, start a business, master a trade. We want companies to move to America, stay in America, and hire American workers. In short, we want every American to be able to live the American dream, just like my family did. Bridget was kind enough to mention my grandfather in that gracious introduction. That Irishman's brogue still rings in my ears. My grandmother's parents actually also immigrated from Ireland. My grandparents' daughter, that precocious redhead, now 90 years young, just living out all the passion every day of a first-generation American in her love for this country. I was literally raised on the footstool of the American dream. My grandfather told me about how he walked in that field across from the thatch-roofed home that he and his 8 brothers and sisters had grown up in. And he looked over at the Ox Mountains, and he looked to the west. And the legend in our family is that my great-grandmother told him that you have to go to America because there's a future there for you. And what she meant just wasn't the days ahead. What she meant was there was a future of boundless promise and opportunity. My grandfather came to this country because he believed in America, and he was proud to be an American, although he never left his love for what he used to call the old country. But he raised my mom to believe in the American dream. She married a fast-talking salesman who grew up on the south side of Chicago. Started his career after he came from combat in the Korean War. They followed work down to a little small town, and that's where me and my 3 brothers and 2 sisters showed up. I watched my dad. I was thinking about him yesterday on Father's Day. I watched my dad build everything that matters. A family, a business, and a good name. And he raised each and every one of us with a conviction that we got to give back to this country for everything that had given our family. People have asked me sometimes what I thought about on that day of that cold day in January 2017 when I raised my right hand and took the oath of office to be your vice president. I was thinking of my grandfather. I was thinking he was probably looking down from glory, and first off, I figured he was probably more than a little bit surprised. I was named after my grandfather, and he said I was the only Irishman born in our family. Still trying to figure that one out. But you know, I think looking down, Grandpa probably also thought he was right. Not about me, but about America. He came here because he knew that anybody can be anybody in America. That if you work hard, you play by the rules, treat others the way you want to be treated, you can live your dreams. We even call it the American dream. I'll never forget, it was about a year before he passed away. He was sitting in the rather spacious home that my father had finally gotten around to buying Mom after we all went to college. And I walked in the family room, and he was sitting on the couch quietly. And I thought something was wrong. I said, "Grandpa, are you okay?" And he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. He said, "I'm fine." He said, "Michael, I'm fine." He said, "I just never thought a child of mine would live in a house like this." That's the American dream. And in these challenging times, that's what we have to fight for, again, for every American. Because the truth is, the American dream is slipping further and further out of reach each and every day for more American families. Our economy is not serving the American people the way it should. I mean, you should be able to raise a family on one income in this country, but for many Americans, that seems like a pipe dream. More young people are delaying having a family altogether. You know, Karen and I learned in the last year the reason we had kids so we could have grandkids. But more young couples are putting that off, and oftentimes for economic reasons. And the share of never married adults has nearly tripled since 1980. Today, 50% of young adults are still living with their parents. People are getting married later, having children later in life, and often it's because it's taken them much longer to achieve a level of financial stability that gives them confidence to start their lives. These are not the signs of a thriving society. They're the hallmarks of decline. You know, in the 1980s, it took a father about 30 weeks at work at the median wage to earn enough money to provide housing, health care, education, transportation for a family of 4. Now it takes a whole year to provide the very same necessities, if you can. And the Bible tells us He puts the lonely in families. I have long held the view, strong families make for strong communities, and strong communities make for strong America. We have to have an economy that works for American families. Our highest priority, I believe, must be to preserve and renew and strengthen families. It's the foundation on which our society was built. At its very core, it's family that's made this country great. I can see from the heads nodding in the room that you all get that. And I hope you could hear in the emotion in my voice that I get it too. That's why all this economic policy matters. Because we've got to have the ability of families to live out their dreams, just like mine was able to do, and yours. And that's why I hope and I pray that President Biden will change course, that he will speak boldly to the radical left extremists in his own party and say no farther. Turn our nation back to what we know will create opportunity for every American of every race and creed and color. But I would say to all of you, no matter what the coming days and weeks hold, I want you to be encouraged. Remember that it's always darkest just before the dawn. Everywhere I go across this country, I'm more convinced than ever that the American people have awakened in ways I've never seen in my lifetime. We've had an opportunity to see without a filter the agenda of the American left, writ large, put into practice. And we've seen to weaken America at home and abroad, and we know it's not what we want. The vast majority of Americans know our nation is on the wrong track. But I have every confidence that unless this administration changes course and their allies in Congress change course dramatically, the American people are going to change leadership, and change leadership very soon. You know, we've all been through a lot over the last several years. A global pandemic, social unrest, a divisive election, a tragic day in our nation's capital, and an administration seemingly every day driving our economy into the abyss of a socialist welfare state. But I have faith. Traveling all across this country as your vice president, I have to tell you that my opinion of the American people in those days went up, not down. This is a freedom-loving country. This is a country filled with people of generous spirits, caring neighbors, and people who understand where the source of our national greatness really comes. I have faith in the American people that if we will but simply set a course built on our highest ideals of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness and all the principles and practices that have created the unprecedented prosperity that is the American story, that the American people will rally to our cause again. And also I have faith in the one who has ever been with the people of this great experiment in freedom throughout our history, who says in that ancient text, "And I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And if we will but have faith in the American people and renew our faith in Him, I know the best days for the greatest nation on earth are yet to come. So thank you, and God bless you. And God bless America.
Please remain seated until Vice President Pence has left Cathedral Hall. Thank you.